The bus hissed to a stop at the corner of a street I didn't recognize. I stood up, my knees aching from the hours of sitting, and reached for my old duffel bag, the same one I'd carried to job sites for decades. Its faded canvas frayed. Edges and worn leather straps were a history book of my life in themselves. When I slung it over my shoulder, the weight was familiar, part tools, part clothes, part memories I hadn't unpacked in years. The air outside was different here. Not the diesel-heavy scent of my old neighborhood, where the hum of machinery and the clang of tools were background music. No, this was manicured air. The kind that passed over rows of perfectly aligned hedges, freshly mown grass, and flowers that weren't just planted but designed. This was my daughter Anna's new world. I had seen pictures, of course, carefully staged images she had sent over text, the gleaming kitchen island, the spotless white couch, the staircase with polished wooden railings. But pictures only tell you what someone wants you to see. That morning, I had gotten her text while still on the bus, my thumb hovering over the screen in disbelief. "Dad, when you get here, please don't tell the neighbors you're my father." At first, I laughed a little under my breath. Surely, it was a joke. Anna and I had always shared that dry kind of humor. But as the bus rolled closer to my stop, the words stuck in my chest. I typed, "Why would I say anything like that anyway?" Her reply came within seconds. "Just tell them you're a family friend visiting from out of state, okay?" No emojis. No follow-up explanation. I decided not to reply. But inside, the old ache of rejection flared up, a feeling I thought I'd outgrown. When I stepped off the bus, the street looked like a scene from one of those real estate commercials where the background music is soft piano and the people all smile as if they've never worried about a bill in their lives. Picture-perfect houses lined both sides, each built in a style that screamed expensive but effortless. Driveways held SUVs that glinted in the sunlight. Lawns were so green, they almost hurt to look at. These weren't just homes. They were statements. Statements of money, status, and a certain kind of life I had never been invited into, until now. I adjusted my bag and began the walk toward Anna's address. Each step was heavy, not just from the duffel, but from the quiet storm in my chest. Over the years, I had imagined this moment, visiting my grown daughter and the life she had built. I always thought I'd feel pride, pure and simple, the kind that came from knowing my sacrifices had turned into something beautiful for her. But with that one text, everything was different. You see, my life had been built from calluses and sweat. I started working when I was 16, fixing fences, welding gates, laying down roofing tiles under the punishing summer sun. Work was never just work, it was survival. And every paycheck I brought home wasn't just money. It was piano lesson fees, school books, and the winter formal dress that Anna said made her feel like a princess. I skipped vacations and fancy dinners. I drove the same truck for 22 years because replacing it felt selfish when Anna needed braces. Every ache in my back, every scar across my knuckles, I told myself was worth it because it was all for her. Now, as I walked past houses worth more than I'd earn in 3 lifetimes, I wondered how all that sacrifice had turned into this, a request to hide who I was. When I reached her house, I almost didn't knock. I just stood there, looking at it. It was tall and proud, the kind of place that had decorative shutters on the windows and a front door framed by potted plants in perfectly matching ceramic pots. The brick was warm red in the sunlight, and the path from the sidewalk to the porch was lined with trimmed boxwood hedges. I took a deep breath, pressed the doorbell, and waited. Anna opened the door with a smile, but not her smile. This one was tighter, measured, like she was already thinking about who might be watching. "Dad, you made it," she said quickly, and then glanced over her shoulder toward the interior of the house, as if nervous I might still be standing there when someone passed by. She stepped aside to let me in. Immediately, I was struck by how foreign it felt. This wasn't the house I had raised her in, where every corner told a story. The chipped coffee table from the yard sale, the wall with pencil marks tracking her growth over the years, the faint smell of her mother's rosewater perfume in the hallway. This new place smelled of lavender sprays and something citrusy from a candle on the kitchen island. Everything was spotless, polished, and precisely arranged, like it was more meant to be looked at than lived in. From the top of the staircase came a man's voice. "He's here." A moment later, Richard appeared, my son-in-law. Tall, clean-cut, wearing a shirt so sharply pressed, I half wondered if he had been ironed into it. His handshake was firm but impersonal, the kind you give a client, not your wife's father. "Glad you could come," he said, smiling politely, but his eyes flicked briefly toward Anna. It was quick, but I spotted it. A glance heavy with a silent message. We exchanged a few pleasantries, but there was an invisible wall in the room, thin yet unyielding. I'd been in plenty of rooms in my life, noisy ones, messy ones filled with the smell of fried food and welding sparks. But this silence was different. This silence was curated. Already, I felt the rift stretching between Anna's world and mine. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this weekend would reveal far more than just a little social discomfort. Because deep down, I already suspected the truth. This wasn't just about neighbors. This was about the story she and Richard were telling, the one I didn't fit into. Morning sunlight seeped into the guest room, filtering through pristine white curtains that looked too delicate to touch. I woke earlier than everyone else. It's a habit you keep after decades of getting up before dawn for work. For a moment, I lay still listening. The house was silent, the kind of silence you get when nothing is ever chaotic, never out of place. Back home, mornings began with the groan of old pipes, the hiss of the coffee pot, the thud of boots being pulled over. Thick socks. There was comfort in that noise. Here, the quiet felt sterile. I stepped quietly out of the room, padding into the hallway. Family photographs lined the walls. Anna and Richard at ski resorts. Anna in sleek dresses at charity events. Candid shots that didn't seem candid at all. I searched for traces of our old life, the years before this one. I didn't find them. No photos of her in her school band uniform. None of me holding her on my shoulders at the county fair. It was like her history began when she met Richard. In the kitchen, Anna was already dressed, wearing a pale blouse and slacks as though she were hosting a television segment. "Morning," she chirped. The tone was pleasant, but formal, like we were acquaintances sharing coffee, not father and daughter catching up on years of missed breakfasts. Before I could sit, the doorbell rang. Anna nearly leapt to get it. Through the frosted glass I saw one of her neighbors, perfect hair, energetic smile, expensive yoga gear. "Oh, hi, Sarah." Anna's voice shifted instantly into a lighter, brighter register, the one she used for outsiders. "Yes, this is my friend visiting from out of state." There it was again. Friend, not father. She didn't even glance to see my reaction. I managed a polite nod, the kind people give before leaving each other's airspace. Inside, though my stomach was a knot, the day crawled forward. Anna took me around the house like a realtor giving a tour, opening pristine cabinets and pointing out crown molding as if I should be impressed. I wanted to ask about the piano I'd bought her when she was 12, the one I had restored by hand in our old garage. But I already knew the answer. It wasn't here. It didn't fit into this version of her life. Richard joined us near lunchtime. He talked about business like we were all checking his stock portfolio together. "We've done very well," he said more than once. Every time, Anna's eyes gleamed, not at me, never at me, but at him. That ache in my chest deepened. But I smiled, nodded, played my role. In the afternoon, we drove through the neighborhood. The SUV purred. You could barely feel the road beneath it. Richard waved at people like a mayor making rounds. At one point, we stopped by a little cafe. Inside, Richard ordered for all of us without consulting me, 2 cappuccinos and a sparkling water. As we sat, conversation hovered around vacation homes, investment properties, renovations. I had nothing to contribute, and for the first time in years, I felt the old, unwelcome twinge of shame. But this wasn't about money. It was about how easily they could erase the man who had carried their beginning on his back. That evening, a few neighbors came by, just to say hello. Anna didn't invite me into the conversation beyond small talk. My role was to stand, nod, and keep my history to myself. Richard spoke about building the house from scratch. They all looked impressed, unaware that I had liquidated the last of my assets to make their down payment possible. I excused myself early, retreating to the guest room. Beneath that curated quiet, I heard muffled laughter from the living room. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. My daughter wasn't just hiding me from her neighbors, she was hiding a part of herself. The part that came from me. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Richard's words from dinner. We built this house from scratch. Everything you see here, we earned ourselves. The way he said it with such conviction, such pride made my jaw clench in the darkness. Because I knew better, I remembered the day Anna called me, crying. She and Richard had found their dream home, she said, but the bank wouldn't approve their mortgage. Their credit wasn't quite there yet, and they were $20,000 short on the down payment. Dad, she had whispered into the phone, I don't know what we're going to do. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. $20,000. It might as well have been $20 million for a man who lived paycheck to paycheck. But then I looked at the framed photo on the table, Anna in her graduation gown, beaming at the camera. The same Anna who used to run into my arms after school, who made me Father's Day cards with glitter and construction paper. I sold my father's land. The 10 acres in the countryside where I used to take Anna fishing when she was small. The land my father had worked his whole life to pay off. The land he'd left me with tears in his eyes. This is your inheritance, son. Your security. I sold it for exactly what Anna needed, plus closing costs. I never told her where the money came from. When she asked, I just said I'd figured something out. She hugged me so tight that day, promising she'd pay me back as soon as they got settled. That was 3 years ago. The promise had gotten lost somewhere between their new life and their convenient amnesia. Morning came with the sound of the coffee maker, one of those expensive machines that grinds beans automatically. I found Richard in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone while sipping from a mug that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. Sleep well? He asked without looking up. Like a baby, I lied. Anna appeared, already dressed for another day of playing house in her perfect life. I thought we could visit the farmer's market, she said. You'd love it, very authentic, very local, authentic. The words stuck in my throat. I wondered what she thought authentic meant to someone who had spent 40 years buying groceries with coupons and store-brand everything, but I nodded and smiled. Sounds great. The farmer's market was exactly what you'd expect in a neighborhood like this. Overpriced organic vegetables, artisanal soaps, and people who bought $15 honey because it came in a mason jar. Anna and Richard moved through the stalls like they belonged here, commenting on heirloom tomatoes and free-range this and locally sourced that. I watched them perform their roles as the young, successful couple who appreciated the finer things. Richard bought a $40 bottle of olive oil from a vendor who spoke passionately about terroir. Anna selected flowers for the house, carefully arranging them in her basket like a magazine photo shoot. At one point, we ran into another neighbor, a woman in her 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a handbag that could have fed a family for a month. Richard, Anna. How lovely to see you, she gushed. And this must be your friend from out of town. There it was again, friend. Anna didn't even flinch anymore. Yes, Richard jumped in smoothly. He's visiting from Anna's hometown. Old family friend. The woman smiled at me with that polite, distant warmth reserved for people who exist on the periphery of your real life. How wonderful! You must be so proud of what these two have accomplished, building such a beautiful life together. I am, I said quietly. Very proud. If only she knew what I was really proud of: the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the decades of putting Anna's dreams before my own comfort. If only she knew that the foundation of their beautiful life was built on the sale of everything I held dear. That afternoon, while Anna and Richard went to run errands, I stayed behind. I told them I was tired, needed to rest. But as soon as their SUV disappeared around the corner, I made a phone call. Tommy, it's me. Yeah, I know it's been a while. Listen, I need a favor. Tommy Rodriguez had been my supervisor at the construction company for 15 years before he moved into real estate. If anyone could help me track down property records and mortgage documents, it was him. You sure about this, man? Tommy asked. After I explained what I needed. Sometimes it's better not to know. I need to know, I said. I need to see it in black and white. All right. Give me the address and the names. I'll make some calls. By evening, Tommy had what I needed. He texted me a link to the county records website and the case number I'd need to pull the documents. My hands shook slightly as I typed the information into my phone. Sitting in the guest room while Anna and Richard watched a movie downstairs, there it was, all laid out in legal terminology and official stamps: the property deed, the mortgage application, the financial history. Richard and Anna's names were on everything, but buried in the supporting documents was the truth they'd been so careful to hide: the down payment, $20,000. Listed as a family gift from Anna's father, me. No loan agreement. No repayment plan. A gift. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Not because I was angry about the money, I'd given it freely, out of love, but because of how completely they'd erased that love from their story. The next morning, I made copies of everything. I printed the documents at a FedEx store while Anna and Richard were at their yoga class. As I watched the papers slide out of the printer, each page felt heavier than the last. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't even planning a confrontation. I just wanted them to remember, to acknowledge, even if only to themselves, where this perfect life had really come from. That evening, Richard's parents came for dinner. They were exactly what I'd expected: polished, well-dressed people who spoke in that careful way of those who'd never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. Richard's father was a retired attorney. His mother had been some kind of consultant. The conversation flowed around topics I couldn't contribute to: country clubs, wine tastings, European vacations. I sat at the table, cutting my steak and listening to Richard tell stories about their recent renovation projects. We've put so much work into this place, he said, gesturing around the dining room. Every detail has been planned and executed by us. We're very hands-on. His mother nodded approvingly. It shows. You've built something really special here. I took a sip of wine, expensive wine that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a week, and said nothing, but inside, I made a decision. Tomorrow, at the neighborhood barbecue Anna had mentioned, I would bring the folder with me. Not to cause a scene, not to embarrass anyone publicly, just to remind them, quietly and privately, of the foundation their beautiful house was really built on. Some truths are too important to stay buried forever. The neighborhood barbecue was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. All week, Anna had been buzzing with nervous energy about it, checking the weather forecast obsessively, coordinating what dish to bring, and reminding me at least 3 times about the family friend story we were supposed to maintain. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that seemed designed for suburban gatherings: cloudless blue sky, gentle breeze, temperature hovering around 75 degrees. Anna spent 2 hours getting ready, changing outfits twice before settling on a sundress that looked effortlessly expensive. Richard wore khakis and a polo shirt that had probably never seen a day of actual labor. I dressed in my best clothes, dark jeans without holes, a button-down shirt I'd bought for Anna's college graduation, and the leather shoes I wore to church. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what I was, a working man trying to blend into a world that wasn't built for him. But tucked into my shirt pocket was the manila folder, the one with all the documents Tommy had helped me gather. The proof of everything. The barbecue was being held at the Hendersons' house, 3 doors down from Anna's. Their backyard was like something from a home and garden magazine. Perfectly manicured lawn, professional landscaping, an outdoor kitchen that probably cost more than most people's cars. String lights were already hung between the trees, even though it was broad daylight. This wasn't just a barbecue. It was an event. By the time we arrived, fashionably late as Richard insisted, the party was in full swing. Neighbors clustered in small groups, drinks in hand, everyone dressed in that particular style of casual elegance that only comes with money. The men wore expensive shorts and polo shirts. The women had on flowing dresses and jewelry that caught the sunlight just right. Anna immediately fell into conversation with a group of women near the pool, her voice taking on that bright, animated tone she used for social occasions. Richard gravitated toward the men standing around the outdoor bar, ready to hold court with his usual stories of success and accomplishment, and I stood there, holding a beer I didn't really want, watching my daughter perform the role of someone I barely recognized. The first hour passed uneventfully. I made small talk with a few neighbors about the weather, the beautiful yard, the excellent spread of food. Everyone was polite, friendly in that surface-level way that never goes deeper than commenting on the potato salad or asking how long you were planning to stay in town. I was Tom, Anna's family friend from her hometown. No one asked many questions about that. In this world, everyone had family friends from somewhere else, people who drifted in and out of your life story without leaving much of an impression. But as the afternoon wore on, I found myself studying these people more carefully. The way they talked about their houses, their cars, their children's private schools. The casual mention of vacation homes and investment portfolios. The assumption that everyone around them lived the same kind of insulated, privileged life. These weren't bad people. They were just people who had never had to wonder where their next meal was coming from, never had to choose between fixing the car and paying the electric bill. They lived in a bubble where success was measured by the size of your kitchen island and the thread count of your sheets. And somewhere along the way, my daughter had decided that bubble was where she belonged, even if it meant pretending I didn't exist. The moment that changed everything came around 4 o'clock. Richard was in the middle of one of his favorite stories, surrounded by a group of neighbors who hung on his every word. I was standing on the periphery of the circle, nursing my second beer and trying to look interested. "You know," Richard was saying, gesturing with his craft beer, "Anna and I are really proud of what we've built together. When we bought our house 3 years ago, we were just a young couple with big dreams and not much else. But we rolled up our sleeves, made some smart financial decisions, and turned those dreams into reality." Nods all around. Someone made an appreciative comment about the American dream. "The thing is," Richard continued, warming to his theme, "nothing was handed to us. Every dollar we invested, every renovation we completed, every improvement we made, it all came from our own hard work and determination. We saved every penny, sacrificed for years, and built our life from the ground up." More approving murmurs. A woman I hadn't met yet said something about how inspiring it was to see young people taking responsibility for their own success. Richard beamed. "That's exactly right. We could have taken the easy way out, asked for handouts. relied on other people to solve our problems. But that's not who we are. We're self-made and we're proud of it. That's when something inside me snapped, not into anger. I'd passed anger days ago. This was something colder, more deliberate. This was the moment when staying quiet became impossible. I excused myself from the group and walked back to where Anna was sitting with her friends, telling some animated story about their recent kitchen renovation. The folder was suddenly heavy in my shirt pocket, like it was pulling me forward. "Anna," I said quietly, interrupting her mid-sentence, "could I speak with you for a moment, privately?" She looked up, startled. For just a second, something flickered. Across her face, worry, fear. But then the social smile snapped back into place. "Of course. Ladies, excuse me for just a moment." We walked to a quieter corner of the yard, near the garden where the noise of the party was more muted. Anna's hands were fidgeting with her necklace, a nervous habit I remembered from when she was small. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked, and for a moment she sounded like my little girl again, not the polished stranger she'd become. I pulled out the folder and held it between us. Her eyes went wide. "What is that?" "Property records," I said calmly. "Mortgage documents. Financial history of your house purchase." The color drained from her face. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm remembering," I said. "Because apparently you and Richard have forgotten." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, the one showing the down payment source. $20,000, I read aloud. "Listed as a family gift. From Anna's father." I looked up at her. "That would be me." "Dad, please. Your husband is over there telling everyone how you built this life from scratch. How nothing was handed to you. How you're self-made." I kept my voice level, but Anna flinched as if I'd shouted. "Is that what you call it when your father sells the land his own father left him so you can have your dream house?" Tears were forming in her eyes now. "You said it was a gift. You said you wanted to help." "I did want to help. I was proud to help. But you've turned that help into a lie." I pulled out another document. "Here's the credit report addendum. Your application was initially denied because of insufficient income history and outstanding student loans. You needed a cosigner with established credit and property assets." I met her eyes. "That was also me. I put my house up as collateral for your mortgage." "Dad, stop, please." But I couldn't stop, not now. "Did you tell Richard's parents how you really got this house? Did you mention it to any of these neighbors who think you're such an inspiring example of self-reliance?" Anna was crying openly now, but quietly, trying not to draw attention from the party. "Why are you doing this to me?" "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm just asking you to remember who you really are, who you came from." Richard appeared beside us, his social radar apparently picking up on the distress signals. "Everything okay over here?" he asked, but his tone was sharp, protective. "We're fine," Anna said quickly, wiping her eyes. But I wasn't fine. And I was tired of pretending. "Richard," I said, turning to face him directly. "I was just sharing some interesting documents with Anna, property records, mainly." She seemed surprised by some of the details. His jaw tightened. "What kind of details?" I handed him the folder. "Why don't you take a look? Maybe you can explain to me how a down payment that came from selling my father's land counts as building your life from scratch." Richard's face went through several expressions: confusion, recognition, anger, and finally, something that might have been shame. But when he spoke, his voice was defensive. "That was a gift," he said. "You gave us that money freely." "I did," I agreed. "But I didn't give it to you so you could pretend it never happened. I didn't sell everything I had so you could tell people. You're self-made." "Dad, please," Anna whispered. "People are starting to look," and they were. Our corner of the yard was no longer private. Several neighbors had noticed the tension, the tears, the hushed but intense conversation. The party continued around us, but we'd become a small drama playing out on the sidelines. Richard straightened up, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "I think we should continue this conversation at home," he said in a voice designed to sound reasonable and in control. "No," I said. "I think we should continue it right here." I took the folder back from him and walked toward the larger group of neighbors, the ones who had been listening to his stories about self-reliance and bootstrap success. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. "Excuse me," I said to the group. The conversation died immediately. I couldn't help but overhear the discussion about hard work and self-made success. "I thought you might be interested in some additional information about how Richard and Anna built their beautiful life." "Dad, don't." Anna's voice was desperate now, but the folder was already open in my hands. "This is the property record for their house," I said, holding up the first document. "Purchased 3 years ago with a $20,000 down payment listed as a family gift." The neighbors looked confused, glancing between me and Richard, trying to understand what was happening. "This," I continued, pulling out another paper, "is the mortgage application that was initially denied due to insufficient assets and credit. History: it was approved only after I co-signed and put my own house up as collateral." The silence was deafening. Someone's drink clinked against a table. Somewhere in the distance, music was still playing, but our corner of the party had become a pocket of stunned quiet. "And this," I said, holding up the final document, "is the deed to the 10 acres of farmland I inherited from my father, the land I sold to make their dream house possible." I looked around the circle of faces, then directly at Richard. "So when you tell people you built this life from scratch, when you talk about not taking handouts or relying on other people, I just want to make sure everyone understands what self-made means in your vocabulary." Richard's face was red now, whether from embarrassment or anger I couldn't tell. "You're being ridiculous," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" I asked calmly. "Because from where I stand, it seems like the ridiculous thing is pretending that the foundation of your success doesn't exist." Anna was sobbing now, not caring who saw. "You're ruining everything," she choked out. And that's when my heart broke completely. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm just refusing to be invisible anymore." I folded the documents back into the folder and tucked it into my pocket. The neighbors were still standing there, frozen, unsure whether to stay or leave, whether to pretend they hadn't witnessed this family implosion or acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that had just been laid bare. "I think," I said to no one in particular, "I'll be heading back to the house now." I walked away from the circle, past the pool, past the outdoor kitchen, past all the trappings of a life built on erasing the people who made it possible. Behind me, I could hear Richard trying to do damage control, his voice too loud and too bright as he attempted to laugh off what had just happened. But the damage was done. The truth was out there now, floating among the string lights and craft beer. Impossible to take back. I packed my bag that evening while Anna and Richard stayed. At the party, presumably trying to repair their carefully constructed image, I didn't leave a note or make any dramatic speeches. I just folded my clothes back into the old duffel bag and called a cab to take me to the bus station. The last thing I saw of my daughter's neighborhood was the view from the taxi window, those perfect houses with their perfect lawns, hiding their perfect secrets behind their perfect facades. I wondered, as we drove away, whether Anna would ever forgive me for loving her enough to tell the truth. But I wasn't sorry. Not anymore. Some foundations are too important to bury, even when the people standing on them wish you would disappear. The bus ride home felt longer than the journey there, though it covered the same miles through the same small towns and empty fields. I pressed my forehead against the cool window and watched America scroll past gas stations, fast food chains, billboards advertising things I'd never need. My duffel bag sat in the seat beside me like an old friend, loyal and unpretentious. asking nothing of me except that I carry it forward. For the first 100 miles, I replayed the barbecue scene in my mind. The look on Anna's face when I opened. That folder, the stunned silence of the neighbors. Richard's desperate attempt to salvage their image as I walked away. Part of me felt guilty. Had I gone too far? Had I destroyed something that couldn't be repaired? But by the time we crossed into my home state, the guilt had transformed into something else. Not satisfaction, exactly, but a quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. For 48 hours, I had lived in a world where my sacrifices were invisible, where my love was an embarrassment, where my very existence was something to be hidden. Now at least, the truth was out there. Whatever happened next, it would happen in the light. Back home, my little house felt both smaller and larger than I remembered. Smaller because I'd just spent time in Anna's mansion with its soaring ceilings and marble countertops. Larger because it was mine, every stick of furniture bought with my own money, every repair done with my own hands, every memory embedded in walls that didn't judge me for wearing work boots or eating cereal for dinner. I unpacked slowly, hanging my good shirt back in the closet, putting my shaving kit back on the bathroom shelf. Normal life resumed. Work at the construction site, grocery shopping with coupons, evening news on the old television that still got decent reception if you adjusted the antenna just right. But something had changed in me. I found myself standing straighter at work, speaking up in conversations where I might have stayed quiet before. When my supervisor complimented a particularly challenging weld I'd completed, I said thank you instead of deflecting with humor. When the guys invited me out for beers after work, I went, and I told them about my weekend, not the embarrassing parts, but the good parts. How proud I was of what Anna had accomplished. How beautiful her house was. How hard she had worked to build a good life. I didn't mention the folder or the confrontation. That was between us. 3 weeks passed without contact. No calls, no texts, no emails. I wasn't surprised, but I was sad, the kind of deep, persistent sadness that settles into your bones and makes everything a little heavier. I had expected the silence. Anna needed time to process what had happened, to decide whether she could forgive me for refusing to disappear when it was convenient for her. Richard, I suspected, would never forgive me. I had shattered his carefully constructed narrative about their success, had shown his neighbors and friends that the foundation of his perfect life was built on the generosity of a man he was ashamed to acknowledge. Men like Richard don't recover easily from that kind of public humiliation, but Anna was my daughter. Somewhere under all that polish and pretense was the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, who cried when her goldfish died, who hugged my neck and told me I was the best daddy in the whole world. That girl was still in there. I had to believe that. The call came on a Thursday evening in October. I was in the kitchen, heating up leftover soup and half watching a baseball game on the small TV on the counter. When my phone rang, I almost didn't answer. It was a number I didn't recognize, and I'd grown wary of telemarketers and robocalls. But something made me pick up. Grandpa? The voice was young, uncertain, but unmistakably familiar. My granddaughter Emma, Anna's 16-year-old daughter, whom I hadn't seen in over a year, not since before the move to the expensive neighborhood. Emma, my voice came out. Rougher than I intended. Sweetheart, is that you? Yeah, it's me. She sounded like she might be crying. Grandpa, I need to talk to you. Are you busy? I turned off the stove and the TV, giving her my complete attention. I'm never too busy for you, honey. What's going on? There was a long pause. Then, Mom told me what happened at the barbecue. About the papers you showed everyone. About the house. My heart sank. I had hoped Anna would find a way to explain the situation without making me out to be the villain. But I wasn't surprised. If that hadn't happened, what did she tell you? She said you embarrassed her in front of all her friends. That you made her look bad by bringing up old financial stuff that should have stayed private. Emma's voice was shaky. But Grandpa, she also told me about the land, about how you sold Great-Grandpa's farm to help them buy the house. I waited, not sure where this was going. I remember that land, Emma continued. You used to take me there when I was little. We'd go fishing in the pond, and you'd tell me stories about Great-Grandpa working those fields. You said it was going to be mine someday. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Emma, maybe 8 years old, running through the tall grass while I set up our fishing poles. Her laughter echoing across the water as she tried to catch fireflies in a mason jar. The way she'd curl up against my side while I told her about her great-grandfather, the man who had worked himself to death to pay off those 10 acres and leave something behind for his family. I remember, I said quietly. You gave that up for US, she said, and now she was definitely crying. You gave up something that was supposed to be passed down through our family, and Mom acts like it never happened, like you never existed. What Emma told me next broke my heart and healed it at the same time. After the barbecue incident, the atmosphere in Anna's house had turned toxic. Richard was furious not just at me but at Anna for not controlling the situation better. He'd spent days calling neighbors and friends, trying to spin the story in his favor, claiming I was an unstable old man who had delusions about my role in their success. Anna, caught between her husband's anger and her own shame, had retreated into herself. She stopped talking about me entirely, as if by not mentioning my existence, she could somehow undo what had happened at the party. But Emma had been listening, and thinking, and remembering. I started asking questions, she told me, about our old house, about how we could afford to move here, about why we never talk about our family history. Mom got angry, said I was being disrespectful, but I kept pushing. Eventually, Anna had broken down and told her daughter the truth. All of it, the rejected mortgage application, the co-signature, the sale of the farmland. The years of financial support that had made their new life possible. The way they had systematically erased that support from their story, because it didn't fit the image they wanted to project. I'm ashamed of her, Emma said, her young voice heavy with a pain no 16-year-old should have to carry. I'm ashamed of both of them. But mostly I'm ashamed that I didn't stand up for you, sweetheart, I said gently. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You were just a kid caught in the middle of adult problems. But I should have said something. I should have told those neighbors about the fishing trips, about how you taught me to change a tire, about all the times you came to my school plays when Mom and Richard were too busy with work. Her voice was getting stronger now, fueled by righteous anger. I should have told them that you're the most honest person I know, and if you sold your land to help us, then we should be grateful, not embarrassed. That phone call lasted 3 hours. Emma told me about school, about her friends, about the boy she liked but was too nervous to talk to. She told me about feeling isolated in their new neighborhood, where all the kids had trust funds and summer houses, where she felt like an imposter because she remembered our old life. The simpler one where we ate pancakes for dinner sometimes and fixed things with duct tape instead of buying new ones. But mostly, she told me how much she missed me. How much she missed the grandfather who had time for her stories and her questions, who didn't care if her clothes were expensive or if she got perfect grades, who loved her exactly as she was. Can I come visit you? She asked as the call was winding down. I have some money saved up from my part-time job. I could take the bus. Does your mother know you're calling me? A pause. No, she doesn't know I have your number. I got it from her phone when she wasn't looking. I closed my eyes, torn between my desperate desire to see my granddaughter and my reluctance to create more family drama. Emma, I don't want to cause more problems between you and your parents. Grandpa, she said firmly. And in that moment she sounded so much like Anna at that age, stubborn, determined, unafraid of consequences. You didn't cause the problems. You just refused to pretend they didn't exist. There's a difference. Emma visited 2 weeks later, taking a Friday off school and riding the bus for 4 hours to spend the weekend with me. When I saw her walking toward me in the small bus station, my heart nearly burst. She had grown taller since I'd last seen her. Her hair was longer, but she still had that same mischievous smile that had been getting her into trouble since she could walk. She dropped her backpack and ran into my arms, hugging me with the fierce intensity that only teenagers can manage. I missed you so much, Grandpa. I missed you too, sweetheart. More than you know. We spent that weekend doing all the things we used to do when she was small, adapted for her 16-year-old self. We went fishing at the local pond, not the same one from the farmland I'd sold, but close enough to bring back memories. We cooked pancakes for dinner and watched old movies on my ancient television. We talked about everything: her dreams of studying journalism in college, her worry about climate change, her frustration with social media, her complex feelings about her parents' marriage. But mostly, we talked about family, about what it means to love someone enough to sacrifice for them, about the difference between being grateful and being ashamed, about how success built on lies and pretense is hollow, while a life built on honest work and genuine relationships is rich, even when the bank account is small. On Saturday afternoon, we drove to the cemetery where my father was buried. Emma had never met her great-grandfather. He died when Anna was in college, but she knew the stories. We stood beside his simple headstone, and I told her about the man who had worked 2 jobs to buy those 10 acres, who had planted every tree and fixed every fence post, who had dreamed of passing something real and lasting down to his descendants. I'm sorry I let him down, I said quietly. I'm sorry I sold the land instead of finding another way to help your mother. Emma took my hand. When had her hands gotten so big, so adult? And squeezed it gently. You didn't let him down, Grandpa. You did exactly what he would have done. You put family first. We stood there in comfortable silence, 3 generations connected by love and loss and the complicated arithmetic of sacrifice. Tell me about Mom when she was my age, Emma said as we walked back to the truck dock. So I did. I told her about Anna's terrible attempts at cooking when she first tried to help in the kitchen, about her phase of wanting to be a veterinarian, then a teacher, then a marine biologist, about the time she brought home a stray cat and hid it in her room for 3 days before I discovered it, about her high school graduation when she cried because she was scared to leave home for college, and how proud I was watching her walk across that stage. She used to write me letters from college, I said. Real letters on paper, not emails or texts. She'd tell me about her classes, her roommate, the boys she liked. Every letter ended the same way. Thank you for everything. Dad, I love you more than words can say. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then, what happened to her? It was a question I'd been asking myself for years. I think she got lost, I said finally. Somewhere between the girl who wrote those letters and the woman who's embarrassed to call me her father. She lost track of who she really is. Can she find her way back? I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. But that's something she has to choose for herself. That evening, as we were making dinner together, Emma's phone rang. She looked at the screen and grimaced. It's Mom. Answer it, I said. She's probably worried sick. Emma had told her parents she was spending the weekend with a friend from school. It wasn't exactly a lie. She considered me her friend as well as her grandfather, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Hi, Mom. No, I'm fine. Yes, Sarah's mom is here. She walked into the living room, lowering her voice. I could hear the murmur of conversation, but not the specific words. When she came back, her face was troubled. She wants to talk to you. I took the phone with steady hands. Hello, Anna. Dad. Her voice was strained, formal. Emma told me she's with you. She is. She's safe, if that's what you're worried about. A long pause. Why didn't she tell me? She was going to see you? Why do you think? Another pause, longer this time. Dad, we need to talk. I'm here, I said. I've been here all along, not on the phone, in person. I need to see you. Anna arrived Sunday afternoon, driving the same expensive SUV, but looking smaller somehow, diminished. She hugged Emma first, then stood awkwardly by the front door, taking in my simple living room with its second-hand furniture and walls that needed repainting. It's exactly the same, she said quietly. Why would it change? I asked. This is my home. We sat in the living room, Anna on the couch, Emma beside her, me in my old recliner. For several minutes, nobody spoke. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of people who love each other, but don't know how to bridge the distance that has grown between them. Finally, Anna spoke. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, I said. You never have. Yes, I do. Her voice was stronger now. I owe you an apology for being ashamed of you, for asking you to hide who you are, for letting Richard rewrite the story of how we got our house. She looked down at her hands. I owe you an apology for forgetting that everything good in my life started with your love and your sacrifice. Emma reached over and took her mother's hand. Tell him about the pictures, Mom. Anna's eyes filled with tears. After Emma confronted me about the land, about what you'd given up for us, I went up to the attic. I had boxes up there, boxes of photos and mementos from our old life. Pictures of you teaching me to ride a bike, of us at my high school graduation, of you walking me down the aisle at my wedding. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I had hidden them away because they didn't fit the image Richard and I were trying to create. But looking at them again, I realized I had hidden away the best parts of myself too. What happened next was better than any apology. Anna and Emma stayed for dinner, and we cooked together in my small kitchen. 3 generations bumping into each other, laughing, telling stories. Anna told me about her work, her real feelings about the neighborhood, her growing realization that the life they'd built was beautiful but hollow. She also told me about Richard, how he'd been pressuring her to cut ties with me completely after the barbecue incident, how their marriage had been strained by his embarrassment over their blue-collar connections, how she was starting to question whether she wanted to spend her life with someone who was ashamed of her family. I don't know what's going to happen with Richard and me, she said as we cleaned up after dinner. But I know I can't live with myself if I lose you too. You're my father. You're the man who gave me everything I needed to become who I am. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of you. Emma hugged us both, and for the first time in years, we felt like a family again. That was 8 months ago. Anna and Richard are separated now, working through a divorce that's as amicable as these things can be when fundamental values are at stake. Anna has put the house up for sale and is looking for something smaller, something that feels more like a home and less like a museum. Emma spends weekends with me regularly now. We've started a tradition of visiting different historical sites around the state, learning about the people who built this country with their hands and their hearts. She's applied to state universities with good journalism programs, places where she can get an excellent education without graduating with crushing debt. And Anna is finding her way back to herself. She's taken a job with a nonprofit that helps working families navigate the housing market. She's learning to be proud of where she came from instead of ashamed of it. She's remembering that there's nobility in honest work and dignity in sacrifice made for love. Last month, we went together to visit my father's grave. 3 generations standing beside that simple headstone, connected by stories and memories and the unbreakable bonds of family. Anna brought flowers, not the expensive arrangements from the florist in her old neighborhood, but simple wildflowers she'd picked from the roadside. I'm sorry I never brought Emma here before, she said quietly. I was so focused on moving. Forward that I forgot how important it is to remember where we came from. He would have loved her, I said, watching Emma trace the letters of her great-grandfather's name with her finger. He would have been proud of you too, Dad, for everything you sacrificed, for everything you gave us. And standing there in the afternoon sunlight, surrounded by the two people I love most in this world, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete. Not because we had money or status or a perfect house in a perfect neighborhood, but because we had truth. We had love. We had each other. The story doesn't end with a fairy tale reunion or a dramatic reconciliation. Life isn't that neat. Anna and I still have work to do, trust to rebuild, bridges to repair. Emma still struggles with feeling caught between two worlds, her mother's old life and new one, her loyalty to me and her love for her father. But we're doing the work. We're having the conversations. We're choosing love over pride, truth over comfort, family over image. And sometimes, when we're sitting on my porch in the evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, I think about the foundation of a house. How it's mostly invisible, buried underground where no one can see it. How people walk across it every day without thinking about it, without acknowledging it, without understanding that everything above ground depends on its strength and stability. Think about how I was the foundation that Anna's beautiful life was built on. How for a while she tried to bury that foundation so deep that even she could forget it existed. And how, in the end, the truth has a way of surfacing, of demanding to be acknowledged, of insisting on its rightful place in the story. These days, when people ask me about my daughter, I tell them she's finding her way home. When they ask about my granddaughter, I tell them she's going to change the world someday. And when they ask about me, I tell them I'm a man who learned that love sometimes means refusing to disappear, even when disappearing would be easier for everyone. I tell them I'm proud of the foundation I built, and I'm proud of the woman who had the courage to remember what that foundation was worth. Some truths are too important to stay buried forever. Some love is too strong to be hidden. And some families, no matter how lost they get, can find their way back to each other if they're willing to do the work. We did the work. We found our way home. And that, I think, is a story worth telling.